Well, good evening to everyone again. Welcome here to the Cathedral Center, which is our pastoral center and hosting space for the Co-Cathedral of the Sacred Heart here in Houston. My name's Father Jeff Boehm. I'm the rector and pastor here of the Cathedral, and we exist for so many things, but for very sacred nights like this. And so welcome to all of you from your respective communities joining us for this anniversary celebration of Nostra Aetate, which will be broken open tonight, a landmark moment, not only for us as Catholics, but in our relations with people of goodwill from religions around the world. And so before make introductions, I've been asked to lead us in an opening prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for gathering us here this evening amidst all of the things happening in our lives and our communities, and furthermore, in a world full of tensions, at times violence, acts of great love and service, and acts of inhumanity. We come to recognize our origin from you, our one God. We thank you for the gift of creating us as people in relation with you and with one another. We ask that you help us to not only respect our differences, but to see our common kinship, and to unite in renewed commitment to seek out the common good in a spirit of respect and dialogue with one another, that we may continue to be the hands that heal the broken world that you have sent us into. Bless our dialogue, bless the insights of those who will speak this evening, and continue to bless the efforts as we continue to heal divisions amongst us. Amen. Father, the Son. In a moment, I'll share a little bit further, but before I do so, we have some introductions here to make this evening, and so I'd like to invite up, you just heard from a moment ago, but formally welcome and introduce Rabbi Shaul Osadji.
That are sponsored by the American Leadership Forum, which is a nonprofit leadership organization here in Houston that brings together diverse leaders to serve the common good. And in that regard, I'd like to introduce the president of ALF, Nori Angel, who's given her blessing to this and let me inflict a lot of phone calls and emails on a lot of people over the last couple months, but it's worth it. We're here and we're celebrating some important milestones. One of the reasons that this project, the UN World Interfaith Harmony Week, was thought to be appropriate for our city is because, as we all know, it's an incredibly diverse city. It's rich with so many different religious, cultural, ethnic communities. And so what more important a task than bringing harmony to our city and being a model for that for others beyond. The UN World Interfaith Harmony Week, by the way, was an initiative that began with the King of Jordan, King Abdullah II, in 2010. He proposed it to the UN General Assembly, was adopted unanimously, and has been taking place for the last 15 years. Annually, approximately 1,500 organizations around the world are involved. So we're part of a vast network of people who are seeking to bring the sense of harmony into their lives and into the world in which we live. So it's a very important endeavor. Our theme this year is walking, talking, and working together. And that reflects 3 levels of relationship building. That is to say, creating personal relationships and safe spaces, engaging in dialogue for enhancing mutual understanding, and then working together, translating those words into deeds. So we are doing that, and we're doing that in the spirit of the Nostra Aetate document from 1965 and the subsequent breakthrough in Catholic Jewish and Catholic relations with world religions. it is something that has shown that we can move from historic relationships to new beginnings. We can create new directions. And that's, I think, a very significant aspect of what that represented. But our speakers will talk a little bit more in detail and share their personal thoughts on that subject. But suffice it to say that we're very pleased to be able to offer this evening as an opportunity for us to begin to reaffirm the spirit of Nostra Aetate, and also in the process to recommit and reaffirm that document so that we have even more vigor, more commitment to bring peace and harmony into our community. So I thank you for being part of that this evening, and you're going to be able to literally affix your name to that reaffirmation a little bit later in the evening. So with that, I'm going to introduce a couple of our speakers, and Father Bain will introduce the rest of the panel. The first person I'd like to introduce, it's a pleasure and honor to do so, is Rabbi David Lyon, originally from Chicago, Illinois. He's had a very rich and diverse career in the rabbinate since his ordination in 1990 from Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati. Since 2004, he has served as senior rabbi of Congregation Beth Israel, and he succeeded Rabbi Samuel Karf of blessed memory. In his current role, Rabbi Lyon focuses on inclusive participation in education, worship, interfaith outreach, and Israel advocacy. He is one of the three amigos now, following the legacy of Rabbi Karf, Reverend Bill Lawson, and Archbishop Joseph Fiorenza. Serves on the ADL's Coalition for Mutual Respect and the board of the Jewish Community Legacy Project, and is president-elect of the National Board of the Central Conference of American Rabbis. A prolific writer and commentator, Rabbi Lyon shares his insights and teachings through a weekly blog to his congregation and a weekly Sunday morning radio message, Heart to Heart with Rabbi David Lyon, which is available, I'm going to plug it, on iHeartRadio's podcast platform and www.sunny99.com. There you go. He's also the author of a book, God of Me, Imagining God Through Your Lifetime, published in 2011. And outside of his professional endeavors, this is the part of reading someone's bio that I enjoy the most. Rabbi Lyon finds joy in his family life. He is married to Lisa. Together they have 4 grown children, and he's also a grandparent to Ronan, Annabelle, and Henry. That's your achievement. There you go. Good. Secondly, I'd like to introduce Reverend Dr. Jennifer Hope-Tringale, and she was called to service at Christ King Lutheran Church as a senior pastor in September of 2023. She previously served as the executive director of Tree for Hope, a nonprofit committed to providing long-term hope to children and their families in Guatemala, and as dean of Hope Academy, a bilingual STEAM school for girls in Guatemala. In 2023, the United Lutheran Seminary granted Reverend Dr. Hope-Tringale the Doctor of Ministry degree with a concentration in church and society. Her doctoral thesis, Bold Humility, a reformation of global accompaniment and an expansion of its praxis, focused on the creation of a biblically rooted and comprehensive program designed for use with congregational groups traveling on short-term mission trips to Guatemala. She also holds a certificate in school leadership and management from the Harvard Graduate School of Education and Harvard Business School. She serves as a presenter, keynote speaker, and chaplain at many Lutheran conferences, and also in the context of interfaith and outdoor ministry settings. She currently serves on the Boniak Institute's Interfaith Advisory Board and enjoys teaching as adjunct faculty at the United Lutheran Seminary, hiking in the woods, and keeping up with the adventures of 8 children. Whoa. All right, there you are. Oh, it's pretty impressive. Geetha Ravula is our third speaker. She's founder of the Ashirwad A Blessing, a nonprofit organization that imparts Vedic education, yoga, and meditation to kids and adults online. She's a Hinduism preacher, Hinduism speaker, a chairwoman for Fort Bend Diwali, a collaborative event of Ashirwad with the Fort Bend County Judge's Office held in the Sugar Land Town Square. I always see that on the news. It's really, I got to go. It's yes, no, it's just impressive to see. She serves as an executive board member at the Fort Bend Interfaith Council, representing Hinduism, and serves on the editorial board of Hindu Speakers Bureau. She hosts the Voice of Sanatan Hinduism radio show Sundays, and here's your plug, from 12 to 1 on 98.7 FM. On the professional front, she received an MBA from the University of Houston and worked as a software development engineer at NASA, Oracle, and Accenture before starting her own IT consulting firm, Frontier, where she has served as the CEO and president for 16 years. So thank you all for being on this panel. And Father Bain, if you'll introduce our remaining two speakers.
We have, excuse me, we have with us this evening Shariq Ghani. Shariq Abdul Ghani is the executive director of the Minaret Foundation, a multi-faith organization focused on bringing faith communities together through faith engagement. And apart from dialogue, dodgeball, and barbecues, that part fascinated me, Minaret Foundation works with faith communities to center similarities by highlighting differences and deepening relationships by collaborating on child welfare and food insecurity related projects. Shariq was appointed the chairman of the City of Houston's Food Insecurity Board and serves as a director in his local municipal utility district. He's a senior fellow in the American Leadership Forum and a Truman National Security Fellow. He completed his graduate studies in Homeland Security from the Bush School at Texas A&M, fellow Aggie, and is pursuing his master's in negotiation and conflict resolution, focusing on peace building from Columbia University in New York. Welcome and thanks for being with us here this evening, Shariq. And then the last speaker I have to introduce, I have one more thing to share before he comes up, is someone that I have a long bio for, and at one time, like many of his secretaries, was charged with maintaining his bio while simultaneously knowing that if we ever actually read it in full, well, he'd have words with us afterwards. So I'm going to ignore what's on the page and get to the highlights. His Eminence Daniel Cardinal DiNardo for a long time has been the Metropolitan Archbishop of Galveston, Houston, now Archbishop Emeritus and Apostolic Administrator for Galveston, Houston, and its millions of Catholics that are here in this enormous community. He's a native of, well, he was born in Steubenville, Ohio, but a Pittsburgher who got to Texas as soon as he could. Was raised with his three siblings in Castle Shannon, and he received his master's degree in philosophy from the Catholic University of America and his further education in Rome. But he was ordained to the priesthood for the Diocese of Pittsburgh in 1977, was appointed coadjutor bishop of Sioux City, Iowa in 1997. He came to us here in Houston in 2004 and succeeded Archbishop Joseph Fiorenza in 2006. In 2007, he was elevated to the College of Cardinals at St. Peter's in Rome. And in November of the same year, he was elected by the bishops of the United States as the vice president of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops for a 3-year term, served as president of the USCCB from 2016 through 2019. He was part of the papal enclave that saw the election of Pope Francis to the See of Peter. And then most recently for us, on January 20th, just a couple of weeks ago, His Holiness Pope Francis accepted his resignation from the pastoral governance of the Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston, appointing Joe S. Vasquez, Bishop of Austin, as his successor to be installed on March 25th. And so now he will be for us our favorite itinerant preacher and supply bishop. So before I invite Cardinal DiNardo forward to give our first address this evening, I've been asked to share some highlights from the document itself that brings everyone here together this evening, Nostra Aetate, as we come up on its 60th anniversary this coming October. Nostra Aetate is important, and as anyone who's read church documents knows, it's a miracle that it's only 5 pages in length, and yet says a whole lot in 5 pages. 5 paragraphs, 5 pages. I wish I could share, because that's Most church documents go on much longer. It's a short document, but even out of that, just a few excerpts that have been highlighted here. The document begins in 1965, saying, "In our time, when day by day people are being drawn closer together and the ties between different peoples are becoming stronger, the Church examines more closely her relationship to non-Christian religions and her task of promoting unity and love among individuals, indeed among nations. She considers above all in this declaration what people have in common and what draws them to fellowship. One is the community of all peoples, one their origin, for God made the whole human race to live over the face of the earth. From ancient times down to the present, there is found among various peoples a certain perception of that hidden power which hovers over the course of things and over the events of human history. At times, some indeed have come to the recognition of a supreme being or even of a father. Likewise, other religions found everywhere try to counter the restlessness of the human heart, each in its own manner, by proposing ways comprising teachings, rules of life, and sacred rites. The Catholic Church rejects nothing that is true and holy in these religions. She regards with sincere reverence those ways of conduct and of life, those precepts and teachings, which, though differing in many aspects from the ones she holds and sets forth, nonetheless often reflect a ray of that truth which enlightens all men and women." And then the document goes on to make reference to different religious groups. First of all, it says, "The Church regards with esteem also the Muslims. They adore the one God, living and subsisting in himself, merciful and all-powerful, the creator of heaven and earth, who has spoken to humanity. Since in the course of centuries not a few quarrels and hostilities have arisen between Christians and Muslims, this sacred synod urges all to forget the past and to work sincerely for mutual understanding. On behalf of all, let them together preserve and promote social justice, moral values, peace, and freedom." Then turning to the Jewish community. As the Sacred Synod searches into the mystery of the Church, it remembers that bond that spiritually ties the people of the New Covenant to Abraham's stock. The Church, therefore, cannot forget that she received the revelation of the Old Testament through the people with whom God in his inexpressible mercy concluded the ancient covenant. Nor can she forget that she draws sustenance from the root of that well-cultivated olive tree onto which have been grafted the wild shoots, the Gentiles. Indeed, the Church believes that by his cross, Christ, our peace, reconciled Jews and Gentiles, making both one in himself. Goes on to say, "True, the Jewish authorities and those who followed their lead pressed for the death of Christ. Still, what happened in his passion cannot be charged against all the Jews, without distinction, then alive, nor against the Jews of today. Furthermore, in her rejection of every persecution against any person, the Church, mindful of the patrimony she shares with the Jews and moved not by political reasons, but by the gospel's spiritual love, decries hatred, persecutions, displays of anti-Semitism directed against Jews at any time and by anyone." In conclusion, it says, "We cannot truly call on God, the Father of all, if we refuse to treat anyone as a brother or sister, created as he or she is in the image of God. The Church reproves as foreign to the mind of Christ any discrimination against people or harassment of them because of their race, color, condition of life, or religion. On the contrary, following in the footsteps of the holy apostles Peter and Paul, this sacred synod ardently implores the Christian faithful to maintain good fellowship among the nations, and if possible, to live for their part in peace with all people, so that they may truly be children of the Father who is in heaven." October 28th, 1965. And so for our first reflection tonight on this hallmark document, I invite Cardinal DiNardo forward to share some thoughts.
Where do I put it? Oh, okay. That seems intelligent enough. Thanks, all. Thanks, Father Bain. Thanks for that kind introduction. And you basically gave half of my 7 minutes by talking about what I wanted to talk about, which is good. I can talk about something else. One of the things Rabbi Scholl said to me was, you should speak about this in terms of your own life and how this has affected you as a minister, as a priest, as a Catholic. And the opening of the document is in our time, Nostra Aetate. On October 28th, 1965, I was a junior in high school. I probably didn't know this document had come out. One of the things I do remember at that time was there was a great meeting in Rome going on, a council. And in the course of its 3 years of work, 62 to 65, it was doing an updating and an opening out of the Catholic faith towards others. And wasn't just talking about itself, but talking about itself, talking about herself is the language of the council used, in the world, and not of the world, but speaking and listening and learning also from the world around her. This language sounds very normal and obvious to us. It was not obvious in 1965. If we don't realize that, we won't recognize the revolutionary character of some of the things that are said. Not the least of which is that opening part of the document, which says that the church always feels compelled to reflect what we have in common and what tends to promote fellowship among us. The Catholic Church had not necessarily spoken about other faiths in that same way. What was it that brought Nostra Aetate and its 5 pages to the front of the bishops, some couple thousand of them, in council on that day, one of the last documents that would be approved by that council? It was the experience of the fraternity amongst the bishops, the fraternity also towards those who were non-Catholic who attended, participated in the council. There were lots of things that were germinating that made this document possible. But we should not forget it was Pope John the 23rd who really made this document possible by opening up the doors and saying he wanted something to reflect his understanding of the Jewish people. Remember, he was a nuncio during World War II in Turkey, in Istanbul and other places. And he met at that time whole numbers of Christians, non-Catholics, people of various faiths, and that left an impression on him. And I think that's what moved him eventually to call the council. Now, when this document was approved in 1965, he had already died. Pope Paul VI was a real mover on this document to get it accepted by all, and it was. But what I find interesting in my experience, I recall 2 rabbis I met when I was working in the city of Rome in the 1980s. And they both mentioned Nostra Aetate. And you know what they said? That was a nice document, but somebody had to make it palpable. And you know who that was, Father? Pope John Paul II. For many Jewish people, John Paul II is the epitome of Nostra Aetate in person. He went out of his way not only to meet the Jewish community, but to invite the Jewish community into deeper dialogue. He went to the Holy Land and had remarkable things to say about the Shoah and about the Holocaust. It's incredible. And his convincing understanding of anti-Semitism came from his own life growing up in Poland in the 1920s and 30s and 40s. And that experience of friends who were Jewish and to watch what happened left an indelible mark upon him, such that Nostra Aetate was possible as a document because there were scholars and brilliant people around and good Pope John, but Nostra Aetate as a document that lives and is palpable towards Christians treating other Christians and Christians treating other faiths. That's because of John Paul II. That's how that's happened. And what we take for granted, he helped us to take for granted because of his wonderful life towards Jewish people and towards all non-Catholics, non-Christians. I can recall many a time, there's still this one incident I recall. It's political, but it says something about he was so capable of surprises. Do you remember when Gorbachev came in glasnost to the Soviet Union? That was in the late 1980s. And he opened up things. And John Paul II, I think, was interested in him, not just for his opening up towards Christian faith, but towards others in the Soviet Union. And the way he had been treated himself. As you know, there was an attempt of assassination on his life in 1981. When Gorbachev came to meet the Holy Father, John Paul II, they closed everything in the Vatican, and they had this great, huge procession around. And as Gorbachev came in, and he came to the door of the papal apartments to meet John Paul II, he started to walk him down, and suddenly he pulled him into a side room and closed the doors. And nobody knows what he said to Gorbachev or what Gorbachev said to him for the next 15 minutes. But when he came out with that wry smile on his face, he had said to him what he wanted to happen, what he thought was important. And then they proceeded down the aisle and did all the formalities. John Paul II was like that. I could see how his understanding of the Jewish people made him such an important dimension in our church of the horrors of anti-Semitism. But he included within his purview every person of goodwill, since for John Paul II, the one thing that mattered was the human person. So I could stand up here and read some of my notes that are more scholarly, but I have to tell you the truth, friends. What I remember most about Nostra Aetate is how John Paul II helped me as a Catholic and helped other Catholics understand why are we the way we are? Why have we become what we are? Why do we need to change and be receptive and open to not only to the Jewish community, but to the Islamic community and to those Eastern religions that are so important a part of our culture? This hit me even more 21 years ago, sisters and brothers, when I came to this place from Iowa, and I looked around and said, this is the United Nations. Everybody's here, everybody. And that means every religion, every faith. And you know what? Let's give or take some things. Houston lives in relative concord. Now, from my point of view, that's how I see Nostra Aetate taking place palpably in the world here. We must become friends. We're not always going to agree. In fact, we're probably going to have some vigorous theological disagreements. But what we have is solid, the heart human person, which John Paul II, I think, gave to the church. So what do I think about Nostra Aetate? I think it was a wonderful decree. What else do I think about Nostra Aetate? It gave rise eventually to John Paul II, who taught us palpably how to live it. Thanks.
Well, good evening, and thank you for those beautiful words, Cardinal DiNardo. You never fail to inspire and to bring us all together with such meaning and such sincerity. In 1965, the world was adhering to the hope that many dreams would come to pass, not the least of which was the end of a centuries-old hurt that the Catholic Church held against the Jewish people. But rather than see the 1960s as a time of radical change in itself, we would do possibly better to observe the world as having renewed its relationship between religion and humanity. As the Enlightenment and an age of reason and science emerged, God's teachings appeared to be emerging too. Though science would share space in the world of religions, it would not replace religion as the enduring source of what to do with science. And as weapons grew more powerful and medicine grew more effective, religion guided our human power to effect human good. So we've all been taught together to beat our swords into plowshares and our spears into pruning hooks. We try to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. And we aim to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. The prophets who led us and the sages who taught us finally penetrated our shielded hearts and stubborn minds. At that time, the arc of history did bend towards justice because we adhered to the faith that urged us in that direction. It began with individuals, as Cardinal DiNardo pointed out, and then it penetrated our strongest religious and political institutions. It always did. In Judaism, when the rabbis of old debated how the Torah should be interpreted and the laws written, they sometimes found themselves at an impasse. They debated as long as their argument was, as they taught, for the sake of heaven. But if all else failed, they went to see what the people were doing. They couldn't enforce a law that no one would follow. And the people, left to their own understanding of the law, often came to their own best conclusion. Thus was born the law in that place for those times. Likewise, in the 1960s, people were seizing on the hopes and dreams of the prophets, ancient and modern, to end the divisions that drove humanity to break holy laws and to do it in the divine name, and to stand on unsteady heaps of victory ground. Instead, they bowed to the power of enduring faith and to the humbleness of their humanity. And my predecessor's predecessor, Rabbi Hyman Judah Schachtel of blessed memory, once wrote that though we are small, we are meaningfully related to the divine. In his words, we see that we are small but not insignificant. And when we are small in our own eyes, we leave room for the grandeur of God's holy place that fills the heavens and the earth. I was going to share some of the highlights of Nostra Aetate, but you heard the highlights that were so meaningful to the world around us, and most importantly, to me, a Jew and a rabbi, to the Jewish community, to feel heard, to feel included, and to feel, as Cardinal DiNardo said, that John Paul II invited us all into the faithful work that would build community. In a key passage from Nostra Aetate, we read anew, and I took note, as the Sacred Synod searches into the mystery of the Church and remembers the bond that spiritually ties the people of the New Covenant to Abraham's stock. And I want to go off of my own notes to share with you what some of you know, that last August I was invited to go to Rome with a small group of 15 people, Catholics, Christians, and one Jew, one rabbi, me, to visit with Pope Francis. And the purpose of our visit was to accomplish a conversation with him that stemmed from the work of the Metropolitan Organization, TMO, our community organizing group that lifts up the most vulnerable and gives them a voice and a power to make change for themselves on a number of different social, economic, and political issues. And as we prepared one day and then approached the residence of Santa Marta to visit with Pope Francis, we assembled in the room and we gathered. All of us had a short vignette to share about our experience in Houston and the Southwest, about the work we were doing. And somehow I felt that as the only Jew and rabbi in the room, that I might be called on to share my vignette. I wasn't wrong. And so the Pope and I shared a conversation. He spoke in Spanish and I had a translator in my ear. And as we spoke to each other, and I shared with him how it is that in Houston, Texas, of all places, but as you said, Cardinal, we're a city of such diversity. Stephen Kleinberg has pointed out that by 2050, our city will be a mirror of the rest of the country. Or I should say the rest of the country should look like Houston, Texas, where 145 different languages are spoken. And when we spoke to the Pope, He said the reason he took such interest is that in a place where he's from, in Buenos Aires, he said such community organizing work would be akin to rebellion. He was so astonished, so impressed by what we can do together, given all the different languages we speak, all the different religions that we observe, but somehow find common ground to inspire other people to find their own voice, to make a difference for themselves without causing rebellion, without overthrowing a government, and without being arrested most of the time. And so when I finished my words to Pope Francis, I said there is a teaching from the Mishnah from the 3rd century that says, none of us are obligated to finish all the work that needs to be done, but neither are we free to desist from trying. The day is short, the work is long, and God is waiting. And with those words, he was prompted to call in his aid, and he distributed among us many encyclicals, readings in Spanish and English that he gave to all of us. I thought, how am I going to bring this stack of books home in the small suitcase that I brought to Rome with me? But it was my pleasure and privilege to bring them home, because we found, just as Nostra Aetate suggests, a common ground, a common meaning of inspiration that is not only from our own hearts, but truly sacred texts that inspires us to respond to those texts, because that's our obligation. Not only to do them just as we're taught, but to choose how to do them in our time and in our place. So tonight, on the 60th anniversary of this sacred book that has meant so much to so many people, Abraham's stock stands together in the representation of all faiths that grew from him, and all faiths that honor the creation of humanity in the divine image. I've cited before that our rabbinic teachings explain that only one man was created at the beginning, so that no one might say that my Father was greater than yours. We are equals before God. We are brothers and sisters in families of faiths, and the friendships that we have nurtured and celebrated are not superficial. The friendships that we have enjoyed are the rewards for adhering to our respective faiths and honoring the faiths of others. And that has certainly been my pledge, even as I returned to Houston in 2004, 21 years ago, and found among many faith leaders, many of whom are sitting right here at the table, people who I can turn to, I can speak to, and I can learn from. And as long as we keep dialogue open before us, I don't think there's anybody who ever takes a political seat or a religious place of leadership that could ever dissuade us from doing the good and holy work that we've begun to do and promise to continue. Thank you.
It is such an honor to be part of this panel with all of you esteemed Houstonian leaders. Truly, this is really an honor and pleasure to share this evening with you. Though a variety of Protestant leaders had made public statements concerning interfaith relations beforehand, Nostra Aetate was profound for the broader Christian community, lending both support to these prior statements and even more so proclaiming a comprehensive and authoritative stance with profound and wide-reaching implications. Nostra Aetate not only made theological claims, but additionally offered practical and concrete calls to action for the wider Christian community. In my own Lutheran tradition, many of these historical calls to action emphasized reconciliation and apology for active and passive roles that we played in oppression and persecution of those of other faiths. I stand here today in recognition of this history and also in commitment to a different future. As a praxis professor, my real interest and joy are found in exploring how we can very practically apply its principles and ideas in our current context to create concrete behaviors and actions that can be practiced, because practice makes easy. And we need practice because our society brings with it many challenges to building better interfaith relations. We are faced daily with cultural pressures, often coming from a barrage of media that reinforces biases and prejudices. Simply by allowing ourselves to be exposed to those inputs, we reinforce neural pathways in our brains that perpetuate othering. It's easy to sit in the comfort of our own particular demographic than to venture into the uncomfortable space of the unknown. It's tempting to choose the path of least resistance, where we maintain status quo and where we hold tightly to our assumptions of the other and perceived superiority. To remain in this world, however, is to be trapped in a lie that we do not need each other. And so the question becomes, how can we embrace the spirit of Nostra Aetate in our time and context to continue to grow deeper in faith and interfaith partnership between our faith communities in order to serve the common good? I'd like to answer that question from my own perspective using the metaphor of a backstrap loom, which I brought with me. I'm a mother to several children who were born in Guatemala and founded a nonprofit focused on education and opportunity for children in Guatemala many years ago. And in the process of building a relationship and learning about Guatemalan culture, I found myself fascinated when watching indigenous women sitting on their knees on the ground with a strap behind their back, attaching this loom taut between a tree and their back. I was so fascinated, I asked an indigenous grandma named Doña Alcira if she would give me lessons, if she would teach me to weave in this particular way. And so Doña Alcira spent many Saturday afternoons teaching me techniques and methodology, tautness of the loom and patterning, using this very antique and loved piece of fabric that had been passed down from generations. She taught me how to find joy and humor in our new relationship, and I discovered what I will call bold humility, kneeling on the ground with her, sharing vulnerability and strength. One of the purposes of Nostra Aetate was to promote unity and love. Unity is not conformity, nor is it sameness in practice nor belief. In the context of the loom, unity means that we choose to be woven in the loom together. As a textured thread, we maintain our diversity of teachings and our sacred rituals with integrity, and we come together with other threads in relationship, treasuring the truths that we carry. We're called to hospitality in interfaith relationships. This is, to me, like introducing new threads, new colors, or new patterns into the loom. This could happen at any time when you are weaving. Sometimes an unexpected combination of color gives the most impactful pattern. In the context of the loom, it's easy to see that when hatred or prejudice affect some of us, the interwovenness does not permit the others of us to ignore it. Injury to part of the tapestry would create a hole, and all will unravel if it's not tended to. In a loom, there is no choice when it comes to standing in solidarity, as there is no pretense of connection. Interconnectedness is obvious. A fracture to one part has immediate implications to the rest. And I would be remiss, being a Lutheran in the room, if I were not to mention grace, the concept we Lutherans hold dear. The Nostra Aetate references grace as coming from God's fountain of all-embracing love. When kneeling on the ground with the loom taut between your back and the pole, one sits in a posture of humility. When one is learning to weave, mistakes are inevitable. The threads of the loom do not go back and forth into the exact spot that you want them to go, and the pattern is broken. In these moments, a master weaver helps their student by taking the loom off of their body and putting it on theirs while working backward to find the faults in the weaving and to repair it. For me, this symbolizes in building deep interfaith partnerships, there will be certainly times when we offend each other. And if we are honest with ourselves, we will all start out unconsciously incompetent with how to best approach conversations that matter. In these moments, we must metaphorically sit on our knees in humility and work backwards before working forwards, asking for forgiveness and seeking reconciliation with one another. Then we can move forward together boldly with newfound strength in our relationships. When one learns to weave, much attention is paid to the exact part of the weaving that you are working on, but eventually it's time for a break, and you lift the loom off your body, and you take a look at what you've been creating. Moments of pure delight and joy and love are experienced by simply being in the presence of the unfolding tapestry. Our time spent in developing interfaith relations that serve common good brings joy and delight as we learn more about ourselves and each other and see the possibilities unfold as our relationships grow and deepen. I am new to Houston, and having lived most of my life somewhere else, I've been delighted to find in Houston interfaith colleagues who are ready and willing and even more eager to engage in meaningful conversation in spaces of trust sharing, in partnership to address social causes and problems together. This brings me great hope. I would like to finally offer one practical example of what I will call lived-in hope that I have found as a personal experience since arriving here. On one such evening, I was gathered in the home of Rice University professor and scholar Elaine Eklund, a colleague, Kim, who is here from Interfaith Ministries for Greater Houston, connected me with a new colleague from the Raindrop Foundation, knowing we had similar interests. This connection led to a meeting that had the purpose simply of sharing a meal and getting to know each other better. When we sit down and we share a meal without an agenda, something very special, very sacred happens. Christians might call this special time together Kairos time, when time itself seems to stand still, to wait and to be held in holy space where we delight in each other's presence, in each other's conversation, in listening to each other's hopes and dreams, in experiencing the divine in the other's life and seeing how we're interconnected. And for me, on that particular time and day, sacred time was indeed shared and new friendships were formed. We were spurred to want to have a future gathering with our communities together. And at this future gathering, Christmas cookies and Turkish coffee were shared, along with conversations between our men and our women, our young adults and our teens. And in this sacred time and space, we learned about each other. We formed new friendships, and more future commitments were made. You see, time spent together led our communities to want to spend more time together. And now our future planning has been taken on by the young adults in the group, which deeply encourages me. I never finished this weaving. As you can see, threads hang untucked, and the tapestry remains on the loom. It hangs on my wall in my office as a reminder that I'm not yet finished. I still have much to learn about interfaith relations. This tapestry also reminds me that we are interconnected as we rely on God and on each other for love, support, and life. Practice makes easy. With the signing of this mutual letter of reaffirmation, I promise to keep practicing, to allow myself and those I lead to be woven into new patterns that you and I may not be familiar with. I confess I am, and my community is bound to you and bound to yours. And I celebrate with you here today, looking forward in bold humility toward the beautiful tapestry that we are creating together. Let it be so. Amen.
An imam, a rabbi, and a pastor were walking through the Capitol building a couple of years ago. And anytime an imam, a rabbi, or a pastor are walking in the Texas legislature, it's usually myself or one of our staff members that are pushing them from behind. And every time we walk the hallways together, it's always a sight to see for everyone else. And they're dressed in full robes. And the imam looks like an obvious imam. The rabbi comes, looks like an obvious rabbi, almost if you see him from behind, you've got to keep up. And then the priest always looks like a very stereotypical priest. And we do this on purpose to elicit reactions. And as we're walking through the Capitol building, there's always an individual in a wheelchair with 2 Confederate flags and an assault rifle. And he's always staging some kind of a protest in the basement. And even he has to stop doing whatever he's doing and take a look at us, because we're a sight to see. And our purpose in going to the Capitol building that specific day was that there was going to be the introduction of a bill on the floor that would be very, very harmful to non-Christians, but also Christians as well who weren't of the Baptist variety. And we wanted to speak with the legislator and his buddies and talk to them about how we actually felt about the bill, because it was an issue of common concern amongst the imam, the rabbi, and the pastor who were walking the halls of the Capitol building. And so we go into the first office, and we go and we pray with the legislator, and it was a good meeting. He didn't really listen to us. We go into the second office, and the doors never close to us because we're such an unusual sight. Everyone wants to know what we have to say. And the legislator didn't really care much for what we had to say, but committed to praying on it, and we prayed together. And we went to the third, and we went to the fourth, and we went to the fifth, until we went to the person who was introducing the bill. And this individual is a Catholic, a practicing Catholic. And out from my briefcase came the Nostra Aetate. And I shared it with him, and I said, or I shared it with the legislator, no genders here. I shared it with the legislator, and the legislator had said that he had heard about it, but he'd never read it. And so the priest, he was a Catholic priest, read highlights of the document, of the treaty, to the legislator. And then we prayed together. And the legislator's mind wasn't changed. We walked out, and as we were walking out in defeat, the legislator ran out after us, sobbing, visibly crying, and said, "I thought you two didn't like one another." That was the takeaway from the conversation. And the imam held the rabbi's hand and said, "He is my cousin." And the priest held the imam's hand and said, "He is my cousin." And the legislator said, "I won't introduce the bill any longer." And he pulled it from the House floor. And it was a victory. And it was an amazing victory. But it came after we had introduced the document to him that he didn't know about. This document is a beautiful document in that it provides an acknowledgement of shared values. And it also calls for mutual respect. But one of the aspects of the document, as I was rereading it again, that really resonated to me was how the Muslims were referred to in passing. And it says, while not addressing the historical tensions between Christian and Muslims, it contributed to a broader effort to move beyond past misunderstandings and conflicts. It acknowledged the conflicts that occurred between the Muslim world and the Catholic Church, which there weren't very many, I would say. There were many between the Muslim world and the Catholic Church. And the document acknowledged the differences between the Muslim community and Catholic Church, and it acknowledged the past tensions without identifying any. And it essentially said, we've had some bad blood, but let's move on from it and let's join together in humanity. And I thought that was beautiful. Why continue to revisit the sins of the past on both sides of the aisle? Why continue to hold each other accountable for historical grievances that were experienced by people who had perished hundreds of years ago? Why continue to hold people to the fire for actions that they had no hand in? It said, we acknowledge grievances, but let's move forward. And that, for me, is a lesson for even today. As our friends in the Catholic Church have come under a slight attack at the national level by individuals in power, some of them new Catholics themselves. And then our friends in the Lutheran Church are also experiencing the same kind of discomfort at a national level. We continue to experience these types of discomfort, not just now, but yesterday, months before, years before. But there has to be a point in time where we say, instead of revisiting every single grievance that I have with you, instead of letting the grievances that I have with you define the way I look at you, let's put that aside for Christ, for Allah, for Hashem, for anyone. Let's put these grievances aside and let's look at each other with mutual respect, and acknowledge that we all have a place to play in this world. For me, this document was a reminder that we have to move past how we differ with one another and move forward on the values that we share together.
Namaste, pranam. I bow to the divine in each and every one of you. So that itself connects all of us. My name is Geetha Ravula, representing Hinduism, and I really appreciate all of you and the team for today inviting me, and Kim for recommending, suggesting for me to be here. It's really, really wonderful event. Really love it from the bottom of my heart, and congratulations for celebrating 60th anniversary of Nostra Aetate. And yes, in 1965, I was not born. Yeah, maybe I was somewhere up there looking at people trying to solve problems here. Hopefully I was there somewhere. But it's such a wonderful thing. Interfaith is so dear to my heart. It's natural, it's innate. And humanity is common sense. Right, we all know that, but still we are so tied to our religion. And we're trying to solve and trying to solve something we created. Like Shariq was saying, we were not there. Even when all this happened, all these differences happened hundreds of years back. But that being said, I wanted to share something, which I'm connected to interfaith through the organization we founded, Ashirwad A Blessing Temple. In 2012, we had our annual event, first annual event where we celebrated kids to present Hinduism. So in 2012, and because kids were so hesitating to present their religion. So in 2013, we thought, why don't we open doors for every religion so that we can learn also from other religions. So we invited, imams, Muslims, Christians, and Buddhist, Jains. Everybody came, and it was like we had 2-minute elevated presentations for everybody walking through the fair. They get to learn not only Hinduism, but from the authentic leaders from all other religions as well. So that was our first event. I didn't know that today I'll be here. I didn't envision it was just for kids we wanted to do. It was for parents. We wanted to open doors and let them learn about the religion, other religions, so that we can celebrate the commonalities and keep the differences aside, which again, a lot of speakers have said that, right? And coming to the Hindu point of view, Hindu religion, there are so many places, so many scriptures. It is a vast religion, it is very diverse, but at the same time, it talks about unity in diversity. So there are some of the quotations I would like to share why it aligns with the Nostra Aetate. And especially the interfaith dialogue holds an important role where we communicate. I mean, this communication and opening our minds to embrace other religions, that's the only way to understand other religions, right? So human being, according to scriptures or wherever we see, they have good qualities. But only reason why a human being goes in a wrong direction is when we misunderstand others. So when we open our mind to understand others, everything is resolved. we see the commonalities again. So here, I was so touched when I went and researched about the Nostra Aetate, profoundly impacting, especially all the religions coming in and doing collective social projects or just dialogue and dinner dialogue. So that way we embrace other religions, we open up to other religions. And some of the Hindu quotations I would like to share with you, which are totally in alignment with Nostra Aetate, is, before that, I don't know how many of you know about Hinduism. Hinduism has 6 schools of thought, which are aligned with theist thoughts, which is called Astika Darshan. And then there are Nastik, they don't believe in God. There are 3 school of thoughts, so it's vast. So it embraces both belief in God and non-belief in God. So, and everything pointing to unity, oneness. So in Bhagavad Gita, which is the holy scripture, God says, the one who remains steady in happiness and distress is eligible for permanent freedom. So mind has to be poised in order to experience that, or eligibility for just permanent freedom. So that means the mind should be in oneness. Mind should be internally accepting everything and everybody. So if you deviate even a little bit, you are divisive. So you're not eligible for freedom. So in the 2nd chapter, God says that, which means in anybody, or at least people who are believing Hinduism, if they don't align with their mind, if their mind is not equipoised, if their mind is divisive on anything, that means they cannot attain God. Simply put, they cannot attain God. So, which calls for, again, it's your mind has to be in oneness. So, and every school of thought is talking about it, and few quotations I would like to share. As Hinduism Yoga Shastra, it talks about non-violence and starts about control of breath, and then it talks about again oneness, not just yoga postures, but not only non-violence, the true, how to be honest, and how practicing compassion, love, we all come to oneness. So when I said namaste, I bow down to the divine in you, that means I should be able to see divine in everybody. That is oneness. So that is unity. So when we arrive at that point, there is no divisiveness at all. So another quotation which in Bhagavad Gita again, which is very dear to me, it says, Adveshta sarva bhutanam maitra karuna evacha nirmamo nirahankaraha samadukha sukakshami. So who is dear to God? Who is dear to God? Adveshta, a person who never hates anybody. Maitra, who is friendly with everybody. Karuna, compassion. And then nirmamo nirahankaraha, one who doesn't identify with certain thing, or some religion or some caste or creed. Or nirmamo nirahankaraha. Ahankar means ego, identification with certain thing. Nirmamo means me and mine. And samadukha, again, he treats everything as equal. Kshami, forgiver, always forgiving. That person is dear to me. So when you look at all these things, these are all very, very high vibrational quotations from scriptures, which calls for unity. That means there's no difference between anybody. We are all one. We are all one. We are all, and God says, I'm everywhere. Again and again, again and again. And when, not just now, 100 years back, it says, Hinduism says that thousands of years back, there were differences, religious differences. And at the time, it is said that in another scripture, Bhagavatam, it is said that God himself spoke, his voice was heard. He says, when the king of those times was fighting who is greater God, this God, Shiva, who is the destroyer in Hinduism, who is Brahma is a creator, and Vishnu is a protector. So when they were fighting, God himself spoke. They heard a voice saying, Trayanam Eka Bhavanam. The shloka goes like that, a verse goes like that, which says, don't see the difference between three of us. One who sees the difference between three of us, and they will, don't discriminate between three of us. The same energy that is present in me is present in everybody, not only the three gods, but that energy is present in every being, Sarva Bhutanam. So everybody. So one who sees that energy in everybody, that person attains peace, which means the opposite is one who doesn't see that energy in everybody. He ruins his own peace, he ruins everybody else's peace. He brings destruction to himself, and he brings destruction to the whole world. So that's what happened. They didn't listen to God even. So we are just human beings here trying to put together and resolve. But at the same time, we need to try. We need to, and because of our differences, we see so many wars that are happening, dead bodies of children, kids, rapes, displaced women, right? Everywhere we see that. And I think this is very profound thing which you're all doing, and it's the 60th anniversary. And when we open up our minds, when we have this open dialogue, we are understanding each other, and we are understanding every faith is the same, every God is the same, your God, my God. There's no your God, my God. There's only one God. The presence is everywhere, everybody, everything. So when we understand that, then there will be no more divisiveness, and we will not only uplift ourselves, but once we internally uplift each one of us, that will reflect externally also. So that being said, let's be open, and I really love this document. Let's be open, and we should be able to drop our minds into our heart and open our hearts and follow what God has said in all religions, which brings us to oneness. So thank you. Sarve Jana Sukhino Bhavantu. May everybody be happy. Om Shanti. May there be peace. Thank you.
Is in the fact that it has a life after the document has been printed and disseminated. And the words that we heard from our panelists this evening, our religious leaders, proves that Nostra Aetate continues to live. The most important way that it continues to live, though, is for us to reaffirm its tenets and to continue to find ways to express that. So it seemed to be logical and necessary for us to do that, to sign a letter of mutual respect and a pledge of cooperation, which we've prepared this evening. And I'd like to read it and then invite our religious leaders to sign. And then there's a copy over there for everyone else to sign. So these will hopefully be displayed and inspire others to continue to join with us in this important work that we have set out today. This letter on the 60th anniversary of Nostra Aetate says, "We, the leaders of the Catholic Archdiocese of Galveston, Houston, and the Jewish, Christian, Muslim, and Hindu communities of Greater Houston, and together with our people do covenant and promise to celebrate dialogue, pray, and join in working for the benefit of creation through the recognition in our respective traditions of the divine image implanted within every human being, and of the unity that reveals the loving and redemptive presence of the one God. As Jews, Christians, Muslims, and Hindus, we acknowledge that Christianity bears a message of wisdom and truth that merits respect as it leads to its adherents toward a path of righteousness, justice, and hope for a messianic future. As Christians, we acknowledge that the Jewish people possess, quote, the sonship and the glory of the covenants and the law and the worship of the promises. As Christians, we also acknowledge the truth religious truth, wisdom, and cultures of the Muslims, Buddhists, and Hindus. We together deplore the moral actions of any person or group who hurtfully discriminates any person or group because of religion or creed according to the rights of all persons made in the image and likeness of God. With a common ancestry of the first humans, we promise to defend the other if any of us is discriminated against or harassed for the reason of belief or practice. We do apologize as far as it is within our power for all the actions of our communities leading to or against the freedom and dignity of the human person. We promise to journey with God as our guide toward greater understanding and collaboration in enhancing the quality of life for all who live in the greater Houston region, and urge all followers of Christ in Judaism as well as Islam, Buddhism, and Hinduism to work toward these lofty goals. We affirm our current friendship as co-religionists and implore and trust God to be with us, to lift up to God the prayer of the righteous Job. As for me, I would seek God, and to God I commit my cause, who does great things and unsearchable, marvelous things without number. So in a moment, I'll ask our religious leaders to step forward and sign this document, and then invite everyone else to do so. At which point, the evening doesn't end, because we still have some wonderful refreshments and really a deep thank you to the Cardinal and to Father Boehm, Father Hebert, Deacon John, for all of your assistance in making this evening so really warm and welcoming and so important. So we'll sign the documents, and then we'll invite everyone else to do so, and then please feel free to meet each other again and